Добрый день. Мы начинаем.
Good afternoon. We are starting our panel with such a compelling, provoking name, Digital Society, Causes and Consequences. So just it's of the destruction of intermediaries. So I can't bring myself to say such a cruel word, destruction. I don't want to destroy intermediaries, but I think that this name reflects one of the key subjects that is being discussed in the realm of what's happening in the digital economy. To what extent automation and penetration technologies, innovations, including very blockchain technology, which is extremely popular, and then currencies, etc. So how they will contribute to the fact that the job of being an intermediary, so both state and so will be of lesser and lesser importance as we proceed. And so I suggest we discuss this subject in a greater detail. And allow me to introduce our panelists. Oleg Yugin, professor of the Higher School of Economics. Alexei Moiseev, Deputy Minister of Finance. Trofimova, head of the Alpha Rating Agency. Aksakov, head of the Committee of State Duma. Sergei Shvetsov, so first deputy of the chairman of the central bank, and Alexei Maslov, so head of Alexei, please, so the head of the group of the users of SWIFT in Russia. So it was quite because Alexei has several titles, and so that's why we have selected the most appropriate one. I'd like to identify the main list of subjects that we're going to discuss, because we're going just to have a free discussion, because I, as a moderator, will arrogate upon myself the right to ask questions and even interrupt the speakers, and I think that the audience will have the right to do the same, to ask questions as we proceed. So then, what we're going to discuss first is to what extent today. So there's a great deal of interest to the market of currencies, ICO, and the technologies related to everything related to this new notion of blockchain. So is this a passing vogue, or is the beginning of a long-standing trend? So whether the penetration of new technologies is this a threat for the existing financial intermediary system, or system of financial intermediaries, or it's just the other way around, it will allow to bring the financial markets to a higher level of development. And so to what extent in this process, and to what extent this magical, this magic force that is ascribed to blockchain can really change our world, or this hype will go, so the foam will subside, and there will be no storm, and everything will go back to normal. So the two issues that are futuristic in their nature is to what extent so this new currencies will change our monetary policy and financial policy, and then another futuristic question. So then the status of our digital economy. So what it would look like so 5-6 years down the road. And then I'm not going just to restrict our speakers by any specific questions. I want you just to come out with your vision, with your ideas concerning. And certainly stay within the time slot, 5 minutes, so that we could follow up on your comments and develop our discussion further. Thank you. I'd like to welcome all the participants of today's discussion. So there are, I certainly cannot answer all the questions. because some of the questions.
Точного ответа, а скорее будет, скажем,
Cryptocurrency.
And so, but I cannot possibly. So we need just to identify different points, and so to divide the apples from oranges. So why all of a sudden? So we have those cryptocurrencies, and more people are interested in them and becoming interested in them, and so getting involved, and so then trying just to capitalize on this potential and. In order to proceed further in the new world. I think that the blockchain technology gave an impetus to this, but it's not only the case. So if we look at where these things are going to, so more and more projects we can see so that have this interrelated projects that are related to cryptocurrency. And so, for example, people who concentrate, work on messengers, so hundreds of thousands become participants of this social media. And so they start to exchange information, but not only information, but they have a chance to transfer money, to listen to music, and so then lots of services can be thought up. And then there is a new idea. So why can't we just issue private money? It's a private community, and so then united by common interests, why can't we use private currency? Instead of fiat currency, it's much faster, more convenient, more reliable. And so I think that that's where we are going, because this phenomenon of Bitcoin can lead to the creation of new value, and so around which people concentrate, go around. So because and if they like it, so then it means that they're interested, because like gold, for example. So they're attracted by Bitcoin. So when we talk about Bitcoins, so it's all this is speculation. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a balloon that will burst eventually. But when we start talking not about Bitcoin but issuing private currency, so which unites people by the common interest and so social life, and so puts it on a different level and provides this set of services, this is already normal. It's okay. Okay, this is exactly that can be developed on a far greater scale. And so we can conclude that the digital currency will go and the blockchain will stay. I won't make this assumption, and that I wouldn't do that. So even the minister said that it's possible, but I don't think that if the regulators do not fight cryptocurrency and private currencies, so then I think that the development of digital currencies will continue unless it is forcefully stopped. Okay. So then, are there any other points? So what's going to happen to intermediaries? So this Institute of Intermediaries, it's a completely different subject. It's a new technology, and they create good opportunities, simple opportunities for the traditional banking payment systems functions, so to transfer them onto other intermediaries, because payment systems so that have their own accounts. So they're actually intermediaries as well. But the idea is that these intermediaries provide this service faster, simpler, and cheaper. But how the situation will unfold? Here we have a greater degree of clarity. So if we look at this is the new most recent ES directive, so PDS2 directive, the European Union directive, the most recent one, so which actually depicts the near future in this area. So there are financial intermediaries that have accounts, which are banks and payment systems that have accounts, and there are intermediaries who don't have accounts and don't, but they need to initiate payments among each other. So that means that the banks are different from other two institutions. Is that the banks do not only pay, but they can provide loans and provide other specific services that other accounts cannot do. So the banks can do that. And that is why at the end of the day we would not certainly so that the banks will stay, they will not disappear. So then the banks always have a chance to pay for the payment services and having a certain advantage because other accounts so these accounts are quite difficult to drive into other payment system because the bank can always provide additional value-added services that, for example, transfer money abroad, as by way of an example, just off the top of my head. And so then there will set some redistribution of payment margins between different organizations and financial institutions. There will be this redistribution. There will be new intermediaries who that's all online banks, for example, so they can just bring all the clients under one account and provide aggregated information. Or there are some intermediaries that can initiate in online payments of different accounts for one client, etc. So then it's very convenient for all those who use those services. Then the non-banking sector. So non-bankers, we're not talking about intermediaries that provide access to the financial markets and the securities, bonds and shares. But the future is quite clear. So understand that there are people who have a lot of wealth concentrated in their hands, and they will be. And so this kind of person will not be just sitting on his hand and instruct someone to do direct transactions. So certainly hire a company or a person specialist who will be doing that for him. Then there are many, there is a mass segment with small money, not much money. So some of them are just getting advantage of this direct access, and they work in the markets, securities, capital markets independently and on their own. So then there are some intermediaries of the stock exchange nature. So if they develop those services, then certainly there will be a big retail market. So where these direct participants will be nibbling at the broker's margins, and so then the average margin through the broker and direct access to the services, the margins will be pretty much the same because direct access is not that easy. It means that so there's advising and so then intermediaries that aggregate information, provide recommendations. It's going on very fast in the rest of the world, and so we can forecast that for Russia. So I'm wrapping up. So then someone will just annihilate or destroy someone. No, they will be sharing, and it will be only better for us if they just share. Alexei. Alexei will come out with the official or personal point of view. And so because I'd like to see is how our Ministry of Finance, what's their take about this. I would like to divide it into processes, because as the previous speaker said, and I think that I agree that there are two processes. I would not tie this this destruction or shrinking of intermediaries only with blockchain. I think that that's a general sign of the development of society in the post-industrial society. Which actually goes around this notion that this institute of intermediaries is shrinking everywhere. So that 200 years ago, so the merchants would be driving around from China to Europe and from India and bringing stuff, and made money on it, and so certain margins. So they took the risks, and then they invented boats and ships and the vessels, etc. But this is part of the progress, but it's not something. It's not related only to blockchain, the shrinking of this. And so what's happening right now and so then my generation, older people. So let's try to remember that back in the 90s. So services and loads. So there was this 363. So take deposit at 3, and then issued it at 6, sold it at 8, and then went to play golf. So then all these systems died. And then because the consolidation, integration of the American banking systems so occurred, and so consolidations, and then these new huge dinosaurs appeared as a result of Salmon Brothers and others, networks, chains, and so lots of Chemical, Chase, etc. And all of them, there's a huge banks, and so they had franchises, and they had official, very well paid bankers that did very important job. And so now it's all under the same umbrella, and see, everything is in flux. It's still changing. So let's remember. So then there was this national tragedy in Great Britain in the 2000s, early 2000s, when at the beginning, at the end of the 90s, investment banks in England disappeared. All of them just. So only one. So there were many in the 90s, and so the city streets. So there were just lots in every entrance. And then suddenly they went bankrupt, some disappeared, some went out of business, and so even the British press was that actually England is the country of merchants, and then so all these butchers and breakers and brokers closed down, and people, and only pubs stayed, and so then the tour agencies closed down, and then when I worked at the beginning of my career. I worked abroad in investment banks, and in 2001 I came back to Russia and worked in different organizations. And in Russia, in Moscow, there were about 100 investment brokers, and it's about 100 investment brokers, and there was kind of a renaissance. So everyone trying just to sell shares and bonds and securities, do transactions in the capital markets. In the Russian investment bankers are bringing foreign capital. So that was the order of the day at that time. So just you were there. I said all this shrunk, and so I don't know, 5 institutions like that stayed, and so the rest of them went out of business, and the investment banking business, and so this is inevitable, and I think that. So then robotics came in the era of trading, and it's taking more and more share of the market, and so the first. And so you need just those were good times actually, and I was young and springy, so but it's completely different structure. So then that's why this Institute of Financial Intermediaries is slowly going, because through the portals, which has no physical limitations to serve the clients, if you get a service automatically. So then the service so can provide the service to an unlimited number of people. So if it's an automatic service, standardized service, and so that's why intermediaries disappear. And so then we had to go physically to a certain place, and so but the person cannot hold more than 8 meetings a day, for example. So you have the investment consultants, but if it's a robot, then a robot can do as many meetings as you want it to do. And so that's why this Institute of Intermediaries will stay, but it's shrinking. So even the digital currencies is still there. So it's an illusion when you say this, that in the digital currency you have no intermediaries. So there are intermediaries. They provide login and password. They do that, and they are intermediaries. And so then the intermediary does who saves these two things for you. So then identification and other things. So this little box, this is where you keep all these things. And it's intermediaries who do that, and thus it's not the system itself. It's a Bitcoin system, but the service to save passwords, for example. So then what happened when 50,000 accounts were stolen? So when the service was not provided properly. And so then probably there will be another payment system on your smartphone. So there will certain image, special ID approach that some iPhones already have, and so then legally reflected and legally properly stated since the last of years. So this legally bound system. So then. and not as an individual. I'm just a little bit scared how the system will work, but it will work well. So the system of personal ID on your smartphone. So this is inevitable. So decentralization. So this inevitable consequences of the technological progress and blockchain, Bitcoin specifically. Then digital currencies. Yes, we developed this bill. We have developed it. Thank you for the support, by the way. And I think that so again, just to submit it. But my personal attitude to cryptocurrencies is not. So I agree with what yesterday the chairman of the government spoke about. So then it's a toy, but it eventually will find a niche, and the only professionals will be playing with this one, because some play tanks with tanks, some don't play with tanks, and so there will be some people so they who will be playing with those cryptocurrencies and using it professionally and using digital currencies professionally. So there will be a niche for those professionals, and so it will be. So there are some ways to identify people who do transactions via bitcoins. So there are ways to do that. So because the beauty of the system was it was a system, the transaction that's untraceable, and the authorities know nothing about that. So it won't work anymore, and this is especially criminal area as well. And that's living. So that's why we have learned how to identify those who perform transactions in the Bitcoin realm. And so once, so then the representatives of the password and login. So when they have to go legit, and so they will know exactly what they do, and the authorities will know who did that transaction, and who was involved, and so then the criminal transactions are done through digital currencies. That will be going. That will be going. So that will be a niche. That's exactly what our bill is all about. So we developed it jointly with the state Duma and the central bank. So that's a bill. So it's a convenient, cheap system of raising not much money, and so kind of crowdfunding. So then IPOs, because of the regulation, so that grew from so the arrests so just done in New York 15 years ago by the Attorney General for different so untoward so actions. And so then the market found either another way, just how to raise money quickly and efficiently, which is crowdfunding. And so that's why, as a payment system, I don't believe that Bitcoin will be a payment system, because I don't think that the transactions are faster and more convenient in digital than ordinary standard electronic money. Electronic money is faster than digital because there's no need to validate, and so 50% plus one vote and all the validators in the system, so there's no need. So this electronic standard money is much faster. All the transactions, so because you have just to ask the permission, so 50% of the participants of the system, whether this transaction takes place or not, so it's much longer. And then you have so you cannot there is not a soul to curse, not a body to kick, if something goes wrong. And the third thing, you cannot sue them. And then the third thing is that so then it's the attribute of the state, and so using the cryptocurrency to change it to rash. Because there's lots of issuing centers for digital currencies. So certainly you can say that so there are some so there are different issuing centers, because the digital currency is the whole is any validator, any miner can validate any type of transaction. That's the whole point. Otherwise, it won't work, and so that's why this regulatory factor will stay very important. Thank you. Now we. You have mentioned several times so the events related to how to deal with the risks, and so Ekaterina, maybe what's your take concerning risks? vis-à-vis the development of new technologies?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I guess for Alexei Vladimirovich, the answers on the wall. The ministry will require, yes, definitely. There's no question about it. But for a rating agency, it's a matter of an important transformation. I'll talk about it later. So probably our presence is very relevant at this panel because as a rating agency, we keep watching the market closely and we measure the volatility of the markets and the changes and how they impact the market players, and being an important infrastructural element of the financial markets, we live with them and we change with them. Just like any event, anything. So we can talk about pragmatic and the psychedelic aspect of it. So recently we have crossed the psychological threshold of approximately 10 years from this global financial economic crisis. And so over this decade, everyone was looking for an answer to find a magic driver to restore the market, to bring them back. I would actually warn about such the approach, and because this psychological component that determines the boom and the balloon in this market and the hope that now we are going to find a magic wand for this global economy. It's wrong. Certainly, this is a new technology that will impact the decision-making system, but the effect will be extended in time. Definitely, the blockchain and digital currencies and big data is an answer to the obvious trust deficiency, trust crisis for financial institutions. And the rating industry that I come from, it does not mean that this is the end of conventional financial industry. As we often mention, over the last decade, the banks were supposed to fall, but they did not die natural death. They changed, and so asking the question what's going to happen within the next decade, it's going to be different from something we observe today, and the new technologies will certainly in many ways drive those changes. But today, digital currencies are not yet a full-fledged payment instrument, but I'm not sure they will remain such. As a macroeconomist, I believe that the demographic trends and customs and habits of the people determine the life of financial market. If the mainstream moves to more acceptance and better technological system of digital currencies into the regulatory system, and then creation of the comprehensive system of their value, because presently there is no value of the crypto, of the digital currencies. So look, Bitcoin has gone up in value 10 times, but yesterday it fell 25% only in one day. So certainly there is no price, there's no value behind it, or kind of, yep. But I actually believe that it will take a while for the cryptocurrencies to find their fair value and find their place, depending on the direct and the indirect benefit for their owners, because there are some new types of digital currencies with certain tangible service options, and it will definitely impact their value. So again, the parity of purchasing capacity and arbitration. But now let me give you some numbers, especially if we adjust for the speculative price. Now we're talking about very modest numbers. So in December, all digital currencies were approximately weighing $500 billion, their capitalization. But considering the global mass of over 90 trillion, it's incomparable. So if we take the derivatives, it's approximately $500 trillion. So now we're talking about very interesting very promising segment, but so far it's peanuts. It's something very minor, and it cannot impact the pricing and the payment systems, though it's a challenge for the state. And in many ways, yesterday, probably the change of price of Bitcoin can be explained by the Chinese news of regulation and the attitude to the Bitcoin. But again, this is a new new artifact, new fact. So probably we should talk more about big data, not digital currencies as much. But we are looking forward to many events and disappointments because many people are now trying to grasp what's happening. But now people talk less about big data, but talk more about smart data. Talk to technological companies, production companies. Recently, I had a very interesting talk to a representative of our large lucky draw lottery business, and they were trying to work with big data. So just to get one indicator, they were, spending so much time involving expensive consultants, IT companies, and they were waiting for one indicator for several days. So these are still very heavy, cumbersome technologies. So big data is still nothing, not yet. And we have to learn to extract indicators from the big data. We need to learn to handle them. So I'll support Sergey. I believe that the system will become more intellectual, and then coming back to the rating system. So again, blockchain is something that allows you to reduce this huge conventional issue of financial markets, asymmetrical information, something that the rating agencies keep fighting. So in case we have this information and properly can handle it and make it available for all the participants, everyone will benefit. And this is a very serious threat for our business. So we are only 2 years old, but we work with the traditional rating platform, and we invested in developing the business rating modeling system. And very soon we shall announce a daughter company, and but we provide this service. We started providing this service already, and we keep changing as well. And this is a challenge. But as Darwin said, it's not the strongest who survives, but not the fittest, but those who can change in present conditions. Yeah, thank you, Catherine, especially for the last one about Darwin. That sounds very convincing from a lady. And Anatoliy Aksakov from State Duma, we would like to hear from you about the digital economy, new technologies, digital currency, blockchain. Is it a mainstream today for our State Duma, so our legislative authority, or is it still something murky? So deputies, just like all society, are not free from the real life, and the disease that many people contracted came to the State Duma yesterday at the Fair Russia party. So they asked me to make an ABC report for the deputies, and that I made it, and there were so many questions. So this is a hype topic: to blockchain, crypto, digital currencies, digital economy. On the 6th of February, we shall have hearings in the State Duma, moderated by the chairman of the State Duma, and we expect Gref and Shuvalov and Nabiulina to present and to talk about it, and Yandex, so the owners and the masters of the Yandex and Mail.ru, and so people who are very advanced in this area, and it means that the State Duma takes it very seriously. And as for the blockchain and the cryptocurrencies, I think we have two components here. First, the technological progress and the result of this progress. On the other hand, the digital currencies based on blockchains has to do with well, it's a response to over-regulation of many processes and an attempt to avoid this excessive regulation, preventing financial markets from development, caused the interest to the digital currencies. And as far as I know, the blockchain technology is not new. And the military were the first to invent and develop it because they wanted to know everything at the in the middle, in the right flank, and at the defense ranges. So, and to understand what should be done on the battlefield. And the digital currency could help. Blockchain could help with it. And we need to accept the digital currency as financial instrument and try to apply the same logic as to other financial instruments. But I still believe that the digital currency may become a means of payment. On one hand, it's a challenge to other currencies because they are going to cannibalize them. On the other hand, this is a natural process, a technological process that will allow us to use better modern instruments that would be good for the market players. With the very high volatility nowadays, they cannot be used as a payment tool, but probably over time, when the digital currencies will be linked to real assets, rubles or whatever, then they will definitely, the volatility will be different, and it will fluctuate together with the asset, underlying asset, and then they will be used as a payment tool. Speaking about the nature of those digital currencies, so comparing all of them with the tulip pyramids in Holland, the tulips are still there, and Holland still sells and exports flowers and tulips, and I believe that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies will stay in the market, but they will become more sustainable and find their level determined by the supply and demand, and will keep working in a certain niche that would be good for specific users. Is it a challenge for the central bank, for the monetary policy? In my view, yes, it is a challenge, as we have not yet understood this phenomenon, but it keeps evolving very quickly. So I guess the central bank should get involved and try to embed this tool into the monetary policy and use it for digitalization of our economy. I'm sure that 10 years down the road, at least I hope so, our country will become a success story of digitalization in financial area and up to agriculture, where everything will be addressed through digital technologies. We thank you, and especially for the agriculture. I believe that raising the milk yield and the crops will definitely be impacted by blockchains and digital currencies. So once we mentioned the central bank, before talking about the conventional function of it, I would like to use the fact that Sergei Shvetsov, being the first deputy chairman and an ideologist and the father of our financial and stock market, and at one of the workshops in the National Depository, he said, we understand that the new technology will present new challenge for us, and probably from the registering agency we shall turn into a large IT company. So do you think that it may be the same challenge for the central bank? Will the central bank become an IT company with other auxiliary functions? Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, there are cases of central banks who stopped being central banks, and but I believe while we still have currency, the central bank will remain the central bank. And it's unavoidable that the central bank will partially become an IT company, because financial literacy and digital literacy is another important, maybe 20 years long project. There are financial literacy institutions, financial consultants, and we need to create the kind of gentleman sets of the software kits for the gadget that will actually that will not force a person to tell the difference between bonds and shares. It's going to be deep like an ocean, but once we deviate, we go away from the classic paradigm. When a person is responsible for his own actions and we are not protecting him, but in the area we protect an unprepared person. So the question is, who will be liable for all those financial innovations and financial products that you need to purchase and that may bring a person to trouble? So the technologists who work in the area of smart data and some social media allow you to learn something about a person that he might even know about himself. And in this respect, the central bank has now passed a new 7 years program of refurbishing and changes of business processes and introduction of new supervision technologies. We all know fintech, but subtech probably is still new. And the regulator should change together with the market and become both IT regulator and IT company. The Federal Reserve System is an example of a regulator who has a special mandate for controlling the agents, so controlling what vendors do develop for the financial market, because the regulator agreed to outsourcing. If the official regulator says you, a financial organization, are not doing this and that, you then may be sure that the vendor will do it the proper way. And now coming back to our topic. So Bill Gates said that we always overestimate what's going to happen within 2 years and underestimate what's going to happen within 10 years. I agree. Now we feel euphoria about financial technologies, and we are very optimistic and wrong about the financial technologies changing our world within the next 2 years. And we are wrong thinking that even it will happen within 10 years. We cannot imagine. So try to go back 10 years. So something that we take for granted today could not even be discussed in academic circles. And another interesting idea is that the financial market first invents something, and then some great fuck up happens, and the regulator has to think about it. What exactly happened? So today we're discussing blockchain and digital currencies. This is a rare case when nothing bad happened yet, but we are already discussing how to fight it. Honestly, we cannot know the future. We can predict it more or less with certain accuracy, with a certain grade of probability, and how it will impact our life. But considering that the very technological revolution hits the globalization, and the globalization provides new tools, so we don't know yet nothing about the globalization. Take internet, decentralized system created by the American military guys, just like many things that we use. Imagine several nodes of communication in case of nuclear rockets of the Soviet Union destroys it. So, and they created a network because of that threat, and everybody uses it. And now we're discussing the future of the decentralized system. But imagine the frog effect, the frog jump effect, a new term, new technologies in the markets where there is no legacy burden. Approaches, conventional things. So Russia is somewhere in the middle between the UK, United States, where innovations are going to root in a difficult way, and countries like Sri Lanka and Myanmar, where the new technologies root very easily because just people do not know that they are dangerous, that you can do differently. So what is fintech? If we what's the nature? Three things. So deregulation, so changes of de-intermediarization, then work with data and threat for the intermediaries that today control the data and earn their daily bread just having the data, and distant and remote service. So from the point of view of central bank, the remote service is a great thing for electronic service. So we cannot stop it. And in Russia, per capita, smartphones is better than Japan, China, India, Brazil, and many other countries. So we lose so are behind the United States, but we lose because people have more than 2 SIM cards per capita. So we have 100 plus coverage percent and 70% of internet coverage. And satellites are going to be cheaper, and this business will be rocketing. We shall see the revolution in the satellite communication very soon, and the internet coverage is going to be 100%. And our strategy of financial availability, accessibility, so means transfer from the classic interaction of financial institutions with the consumer to the digital platform. Just like you listen your favorite songs, but most of you are not even familiar with the singer. But most of us will not even be familiar with the banks and companies whose services we purchase, because the products will be sold in a different way, remotely. And the law that Alexei Vladimirovich mentioned, we have developing, is a revolution. If we go back to 2017, we shall definitely think primarily about this law, because it will change our situation. So the question is, shall we need rating agencies if we have this open and transparent and available data, and the computer will have the algorithm and calculate everything personally on each cell phone? So what will the individual do in this system? Because all the risks and inefficiencies in financial markets have to do with human beings. And it's an illusion that we can remove the human factor from the process, and it will be sufficient just to have public data for intelligence, because the data confirm what we had yesterday and what we have today. But we can understand tomorrow only if we take today and add the people who manage. And in Russia, managers are the bottleneck. I believe we have great achievements in financial markets, but it boils down to the capacity of the managers of private companies to manage their businesses. In some cases, they prevented by administrative deficiencies or competition, but that's where we see the vulnerability, and it's not going to go. So intermediaries like rating agencies who can meet, talk to specific managers will be in better position because the retailers physically have no opportunity. And disintermediation. I believe this is a very good process when the upward trend is over. Was over in 2008 in several conferences. At several conferences, we were asked, what next? And next, we have a very interesting paradigm. The broker's efforts to service the clients would give him 120 or 300% of interest because the market was growing at breakneck speed. But now we have reached the times of intellectual effort, because it means that the market cannot feed everyone. Multiply by the capacity of artificial intellect, AI, and machine learning. When machines can learn and does not remain static through algorithms, it will reduce the price for the brokerage services and special financial consultant services. Last year, the law was passed on for financial consultants. Another important, unfortunately, it took so long, but when they started, there were no fintech, but so physically you have to come to an office and there's a smart person and you are happy. He will consult you and then you sue him if he tells you something wrong. But so this law has already become obsolete, and we need to bring it to the modern state. So intermediaries will become more accessible, available, and in the end of the tunnel, they'll be kind of discrepancy between action, because machine learning will adjust to individual user, and the algorithm will depend on the owner. So the financial sustainability risks will be reduced, because imagine a consultant that provides the same advice to everyone. What's going to happen to the market? And the last thing I wanted to tell you about the digital currencies. In my view, I don't know what's going to happen to them in the future, but what's true is that we need a deeper, fundamental change. And in Russia, we are not yet as active as the high school is not yet as active as we would like it to be. So there is an area and generation XYZ. So that values the virtual world. For instance, you found a sword in a game that allows you to jump to the next level. This is not a value for the X generation, but this is a higher value for the Y and Z generation, because for them this is a real value that allows them to achieve real targets.
So which are very important. And then there is a whole new world, which is not is denied by the regulators. But the young generation, so there's great demand, and that's why there are new financial instruments, which allow us not to look for this sword, but to buy this sword. Although the regulators are against it, but they have their own currency, so they have all this accounts and store and settlement. To say, why do you just have to pay taxes, and why do you have just to do that? Because when it's so easy and nice, so that $500 billion so against the 90 trillion, so it's quite a lot. And so it's debatable, but for me, $500 billion is a lot. So that's a sizable amount of money. But nevertheless, so these effects will become obvious when they start to play a certain material role. so from the viewpoint of tax authorities. So when the tax authorities start to be attracted to it, so that's why the consumer properties of crypto regulation. So that it will lose its advantages. So once it falls under the scrutiny of the tax authorities, and so then money laundering and terrorism. So they will think up something new, and although just for the concerning the terrorism, so they'll find ways just to take care of this. So then eventually, so then the cryptocurrencies will disappear because so the buyers and the shoppers will not be interested in them anymore because they will lose their consumer properties. On Viagra, for example, Viagra was designed so to improve the operation of the heart. But then we got something else, and we apply Viagra for something else, and that is why it can be used as a payment method. But they created a wonderful platform for a financial pyramid, for a Ponzi scheme, so now just we can see in these new developments related to digital currencies, it's a great deal of demand, so crazy demand for. But as a means of investing into something that people don't understand what that is, in order to resell it at a profit later. So that's to get investment history. That's why they like cryptocurrencies, because they really want just to buy cheap and sell high. And it's good that we're thinking about that, but the regulators are not going just to do anything that will contribute to the growth of these Ponzi schemes and pyramids and balloons. So a lot of assumptions we have now, and we'll leave it for the follow-up discussion. Alexei, so you represent the payment community, as he said himself. I think that the majority, maybe all our audience, is familiar directly or through their banks with different payment systems. So the largest payment system, SWIFT, is the largest payment system. Everyone knows, so because we're all part of the community of users, and so cryptocurrency named Ripple actually claims that they will act as the killer of SWIFT. They will oust this service. To what extent such risks are real against those ambitious plans to kill SWIFT? Thank you. Very difficult just to come out with something compelling after what has been said. But concerning the interest to the new technologies and cryptocurrencies, I think that today's discussion is yet another proof that, you see, all seats are taken, people are interested, people are standing and hanging on our lips, and this is very telling. So the reasons, so the players want to do something more comprehensive, more efficient, more universal in nature, and more efficient. And when we talk about intermediaries, so all the leading players will certainly try to find an instrument, a new opportunity to be more competitive, to be ahead of everyone else. And so there is a kind of a simile. So when the first planes appeared, aircraft appeared, so they have not replaced railroad or automotive transport, but a new essence appeared. So the competition became more exacerbated. So some players should use one set of instruments, other players use other set of instruments, and that is why, as Anatoliy Gennadievich was saying, that cryptocurrency could become a payment asset. So then there will be yet another competition realm, and other players will be using it for their own ends. And so then, if to be more specific, we need to remember this famous quote that television can kill the theater. So the theater is there, and the television is there, and no one killed each other. And so then, for example, so that the internet editions so can kill printed news, and this is unlikely so far. And so then, October last year, the cyber conference that SWIFT organized in Toronto last year, so there was a shift of interest. So they paid more attention to blockchain, less interest to blockchain than we had this interest than the interest was in 2016 conference. because the professionals are looking how this blockchain can be practically used, what practical use it can be put to. So I'm moving over to some practical steps, practical application of blockchain, and it's not just in general anymore. And so then there's a good stimulus for everyone in this area is efficiency, cost reduction. And in Toronto at the Cyber conference, there was very interesting discussion concerning the cost of financial services provided. And there was this assumption that the speakers made that this cost in financial institutions so changes over a long period of time, so sometimes 100 years, at least long span. And so then technology, can it provide something that will reduce the cost? Will this new technology do that or not? So some people are interested and they get captivated. And so we'll see how it will work out. So then the technology proper, we already see that. So then there are some deployments already. NRD in Russia on the basis of this new technology was introduced in a project related to voting system in joint stock companies. And then so we'll see that not only in the payment industry but in other areas as well. So this new technology will be definitely applied and find its niche. Then with regards to Ripple. Ripple is an interesting story. It is true that they're saying that in the era of international payments they can make a revolution, a breakthrough. Now, I, as a person who is involved directly, I don't see this revolution coming so far. And moreover, now they're offering and deploying something. It's not based on this blockchain technologies what they offer right now. And so then it's related to centralized, decentralized system, advantages, competition, etc. And I think that it's the advantages of one set of systems will be applied in some areas, and in other systems will be applied in other areas. And I would like this discussion to be more lively, and not only the floor should participate as well. So please, so we can take some questions from the floor. Then we'll come back to our discussion. But I'd like to ask one question. So to anyone who would like to answer it, or if maybe everyone wants to comment. I personally, I was amazed. I was shocked with the news before the new year to the fact that our colleagues, our brothers, brethren from Belarus, so their legislation creates a free cryptocurrency zone within the customs union. Russian Belarus was shocked with the news. Don't you think that it might trigger as a place, it will make a kind of place that all the activities related to digital currencies will migrate to Belarus, and because we are going to be very circumspect and cautious and exercise caution about the regulation, unlike them. It is true that I will comment that the Lukashenko's text was this geographic location, so we can do whatever you want. It's a special location in Belarus, and that's a comment on his. And some Russian lawyers, so then they issue 6,000 different kind of authorizations or papers. So this for these people to do this business in that located area. So we don't have it in Russia yet, so we don't have a special location, physical location for cryptocurrencies. But so because before there is any law, we can do whatever. So mining is not taxed in Russia right now. ICO, someone is a leader in number of ICOs. Some of them are fraudulent ICOs, as someone said. So then percentage, so then you said percentage of fraudulent ICOs is quite high, and so this we need to protect the citizens' rights. So if we succeed in this area with the regulatory effort, so the citizens that participate in ICOs, and so they save in the form of digital currencies, so their savings. So there we need just to somehow protect the interests of the citizens, and so then there will be, if we decide that, there will be a risk that there will be some people who will not want so will not like that. So then all this accumulated money will go to this Minsk location. And maybe just we should do something like that in Russia as well. So because there've been some suggestions and proposals to do that, but so far we don't have it, and we don't have any additional bans in Russia so far. So we're just free about this. Okay. Now we have two bills coming up. One is being prepared by the Ministry of Finance and Central Bank, and I participate in that one. It's at the end of January. So it's very liberal and framework, but it certainly introduces regulation in the market of cryptocurrencies. And I think that in February, so we'll submit it, this law and this bill, and it will be passed, and so then concerning the interest our jurisdiction will certainly increase, because the market participants, good market participants, serious, so they want this market to be legalized, so because they want just to be good, honest taxpayers and do transactions without fear that someone will come and take their money, put them in jail, and so they are ready to pay the taxes, law-abiding citizens. Then crowdfunding law is related to this digital currencies law, and so it certainly will give an additional impetus to the increasing interest of multiple investors through ICOs financing startups. And so the adoption of these two laws will definitely give a good breakthrough in the area of the development of the digital market services. And remembering about the scale, so it can easily compete, will be able to easily compete, and so the market participants in that area will be operating there without fear. And because the success is achieved not by presence or absence of the law, but the trust, so this atmosphere of trust, and then the application of legislation so should be contributing to that. So remember that Wall Street, so the Orban's Oxley law will kill the leadership of New York as a financial center, and 10 years after this Orban's Oxley law had been adopted, Wall Street said that this law actually saved the leadership of the New York market, because it actually kept the trusted information on the basis of which investment decisions are made. So that's why the place ICO is not just an exchange of one asset for another, but what's happening after. And that's what is important. So that's why lighter regulation may be needed. How to do the ICO, which is placement of tokens, no problem. But what happens if something goes wrong? So that's the key issue in the digital currency, in placement of tokens. And so I have doubts about that. Unfortunately, our legislation is kind of sometimes is a great burden, and there is a lot of history in it, negative history. It was a legal forum. I participated and I spoke there, and I said we need to change the paradigm. So then the lawyers should serve the economists, and not the other way around. And I was inspired because as an economist, but the lawyers wouldn't hear it. And so they won't hear. So now, just unfortunately, so there's not an economic approach that rules the roost, but it's the legal approach that is more important, which is not good. And and I can add that so we're not afraid of offshores. Okay, so even the Russian citizens, let them legally and physically, and individuals, let them go to go to Belarus and experiment with that, play with that. That's experience. That's development. It's okay. So nothing will leave Russia. It will still stay. And so the brains will not migrate. The brains will stay, but the experience will come. It's good. And that's about from the viewpoint of regulation. I agree that under the circumstances we need to exercise extreme caution when we introduce the regulatory methods of controlling this area. And because if we really want to pay attention to the interests of the Z generation, So then we need to be very careful. So now just everything is going more or less logically, reasonably, and understandably. And so we should not go to extremes. And this is very inspiring because in the State Duma, so they are very well weighted approaches, and this is very nice to hear, to know, because all the story with ICOs and cryptocurrencies, it just appeared not because not just to avoid evade laws, taxes. It's not the whole and more money laundering. So it's not about this. It's not only to avoid paying taxes, but to raise capital, raise money. And there's a psychological research needs to be done, because it's related to the fact that the system of interaction, cooperation, the society becomes different, and it's not TV anymore. It's not political discussions anymore. It's a community of people, and they need different services, and they need different. And so private currency, or the currency of this social community that concentrates around, for example, Telegram. So that's their interest. It's want to provide services to these interests in different ways, and we need to think about it. And I think that we need just to work on this assumption. And so one last comment. So Telegram and in their currency gram, so analyze the speed of transactions. It's faster than Visa or MasterCard. So they announced that the speed is much higher. I'm not sure that the human brain can see the difference. There's milliseconds or nanoseconds, and it's not so important for the selection of this or that form of payment settlement. But concerning this precedent, so there are 2 points. First, we need just to understand the difference between what we have right now, so that Alexei spoke about. So then, by default, we need to do it, right? And so the main assumption is that. So that inevitably, we need to legalize this type of activities. So that's inevitable. So we need to do that, but we need to realize that after legalization there will be liability, responsibility, the state's responsibility that can have different forms and shapes. When we spoke about that, the role of the state will play an important role in development of technologies in such markets. But there is another issue, which is open right now. Just if the people will play with these instruments more and more, and so not always successful, because we remember people's IPOs, public IPOs, and so some deplorable examples and unfortunate unsuccessful stories. So who will be responsible? Who will be liable if something goes wrong? And these things are coming. So then it's a question of financial resources, and it's quite possible that the population of business will start to talk to the state and say, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you control it? And so they will certainly bring them to account. And the development of the digital currency, so the market is not too hot, but the amounts are huge already. So then we compare we compare them with traditional currencies. Certainly the amount is small, but still $500 million is still a lot. $500 billion is a lot. And so in which way the pendulum will go, and that will have to settle the accounts eventually. Who will settle the accounts if something goes wrong? So we need to legalize it, that's for sure, but we need to exercise extreme caution. And then the second point, for example, I have a great deal of experience in working in different countries, with financial institutions that work only in offshore territories or with offshore territories. I have this kind of experience of work with them. But historically, if we look at it, this historical backdrop, so very rarely, so then the countries succeed in some isolated product-related approach in only specific for one country. It's never usually works, and so that's why we build a Disneyland green project in the middle of nowhere, and it will not work like that, because infrastructure should be there. Yes, or other very specific market participants will come and make use of it. unless there is a state policy to attract so a larger so comprehensive program is required. So a great deal of interest, and so it should be done at a higher level, so to properly organize this interest. And so then we need, when we talk about the new technologies, so we need just to think about the implications that may impact and the impact that these implications may have for the society and the government. And so then creating jobs, then certain financial products will suffer. And so it's a very serious, very fine, thin, complicated issue that needs to be scrutinized for, much on a greater scale. So can I just add a few words? I want us to follow up on this assumption that Sergei Anatoliy spoke about jumping a frog. So Russia is a good example that this possible. Because in the payment industry in Russia, this is exactly what has happened. In many countries, and I think that you know it very well. So then the succession was like that. So monetary. Cash, paper money, checks as payment instruments, then cards, right? And Russia jumped over the checks, right? So straight to plastic, and so it's quite possible. So this frog jumping is possible. They're talking about fintech is possible. So, but we need to be serious, and we should not miss up on this opportunity that come along. Okay, now we have a chance to take questions from the floor. If you're ready, please, and to tell us who you address this question to. So let me see if you. My question is. Yes, thank you. Yeah. It's a question to all participants, but first to those 5 who are related to the regulatory framework. And so the Minister of Finance representative for the central bank representative. So for them, it's the first and foremost. So what will be what was going to happen with the digital currency? How it will play out? So several scenarios. A realistic scenario. So when only the only state-regulated digital currency systems will work, and so then identification, 100% reservation. So it's that look like electronic money, and that will become the mainstream. Or the second eventuality is when so there will be a special sector. So we have the state financial fiat currencies and their products, and then marginal anonymous. So prosecuted by the state, so cryptocurrency darknet. So maybe there will be the third scenario. So which one will play out? And so then the second question. Okay, ask the second question. And the second question is, in your view, who is the main competitor of digital currencies? Is the ruble of the Russian Federation, or the euro, or the dollar? And so, in other words, is there this effect of ousting of fiat currencies when the cryptocurrencies are growing, and so then the standard fiat currencies are going? Do you see this or not? So, what's the dynamics, the forecast? So, is this a trend or not? When the fiat currencies will be taken out? Okay. Okay, let me begin. I think that today the ruble or the dollar or any other currency, they are kind of so they have inherent risks for the country where they are issued. And so then about their fate. The cryptocurrencies is actually a hot pie right now, so which is so thrown from hand to hand. So then that side to avoid regulation. And so unless so we just will go around the circle, and so then. And so once it's taken under control, there will be lots of risks in every country where this cryptocurrency goes. So the inherent risk will stay until it is eventually just brought down under the control of the of special authorities. So we can discuss that in 2 years' time. And then there is this direct comparison of crypto and fiat currencies from the viewpoint of competition. So this is premature. It's not. We cannot speak about that, and because the designation of this currency is completely different purpose of and so fiat currencies are so legal means of payment that historically regulated by the central banks of the world, and so these payments so they have inherent risks that the central banks may generate, and so we know these risks. We have lived through them, and in the 90s in the ruble. So now just we have a comfortable situation. So with the ruble, no risks. But digital currency, I don't know just any project, any idea that would claim to become a legal tender. So allowed legal, and so allowed means of payment, legal tender. So for many for big for a big number of participants. So the cryptocurrencies has no such purpose and no aim. So that's now we have just investment ideas, as was rightly said. So that's much easier to implement because this is the instrument which is much less regulated, fast, simple, understandable. Or it's an attempt to set up this new currency for social communities, for ecosystems. I know that remains to be seen. It remains to be seen. It's not. We cannot talk about the competition with fiat currencies. So then the central banks may sleep in peace for many more years before something occurs. And then answering this question, and I have already said about their role. So I would just put it differently. Then phenomenon of cryptocurrencies is related to change of the system of values, because I regulate so the transactions in diamonds, and we can see that so diamonds. So then the new smartphone is the best present, and not a diamond. So for a wedding ceremony, for example, and not a diamond anymore, but a cool smartphone is a better present. So with due respect for Ekaterina, so I would, and so it's true that then the new generation, they do not select Pepsi or diamonds, but they go for something new, much more exciting and interesting. And I think for adolescents, so the best is cryptocurrency farm is the best present, and not even smartphones. And so this is the fashion, this is the new generation. And so as I was saying, I'm involved in so then diamond system. And so that's what we're trying just to do everything to make sure that the girls like diamonds better than cryptocurrency farms, and we'll work on that too. So there were two questions, and because I was not part of the five, because I never just worked in any regulatory authority, but I'll still comment on that. Because to speculate which way we'll proceed, we don't know. It's impossible. And it's premature, and it's kind of the work for augurs and hierophants. And but even so then we don't even have the terminology, so that. Then there's no coordination between the states. So it's just all this. It's only beginning. It's only taking shape and form. And so then the comments from politicians, those bifurcations, black swans. So there may be lots of them down the road. So non-linear development, the lack of coordination between the countries. So the question is important, but there is no answer to it. If we try to give a professional, but if just there is no ousting effect, so fiat currencies won't be ousted, and this is for sure, because it's a certain substance that is evolving and impacts the markets, but certainly it's outside, it's segregated. But it's a factor that may impact the stability of the market. So because while now price formation for the main monetary assets there is no direct impact, but ACRA issues So the index of financial stress in the Russian Federation, they publish it daily. So we considered very seriously to include the dynamics of volatility of the cryptocurrencies in the calculation of financial stress on the financial markets in Russia. We're considering it now. So that's why we need just to widen our question. And materially, so there is no ousting, but there is an impact. There is an impact already, because so the mere fact that we talk about it, spend time talking about that impacts by default on many factors. Then, the presence that I see Vladimir spoke about, and I think that so then he should be not interested in legalization of cryptocurrencies, because the Ministry of Labor said you don't have to declare, and the Duma deputies who are supposed to declare their taxes should be interested in the currency not being legalized. And so then concerning the ousting and the impact of digital currencies in our market, I think that so we'll try to do everything to make sure that the role of cryptocurrencies will be very well weighted, and we need to be very cautious. But we need to see things in perspective. Because certainly cryptocurrencies may become a payment means, but in our market right now, so there are no big retail players like in the United States or China, Amazon, Alibaba, etc. If these national companies, if these huge companies, if they decide to issue their payment method so that it will be used within the framework of the specific company, so that will be big traditional, it will competition to the traditional methods of payment, and we need to take it into point, because I fully realize that if we can any eventuality, any scenario, so how this cryptocurrency will develop eventually, but the central banks or the private companies will have to find ways of transfer these currencies into fiat money and back, and how to regulate this.
But the risk is obvious. The challenge is there. It exists, and we need to consider it now. It is very important. And then probably, I would like to inform you, if you don't know, so very soon we are going to launch a sandbox, and we already have a waiting list, to make an ICO for this sandbox, to test the cryptocurrencies ICO and other tools of the market. And testing, we could see what could legally be used in the Russian market, legitimately. So bitcoins and the like are not money. Money is something that has the comprehensive function of money, like the measure of value. Just like gold is money, Bitcoin is not money, because it cannot measure the value. There is no link to the assets, and we cannot call it money. So it is something different, but what is different is yet to understand. So will it be a payment means? We don't know. In the 20 years ago, a bottle of vodka was used as a means of payment, and even the measure of value. You knew how many square meters you could plow for one bottle of vodka. This is a marginal story. There's a Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Labor regulates the taxes, and such surrogates can be used. Such a substitution money can be used. And speaking about globalization, in our story we mentioned very little, but the world becomes global and we need to consider it. And for the central bank, one of the challenges, important challenges, and so far we don't yet even have a strategy about it, providing financial services cross-border to the Russian citizens. We regulated the local banks, the brokers, insurance companies, but the services cross-border through website, so a number can be provided by many companies from various jurisdictions. And probably this type of pseudo-currencies will help providing such services if we start using the payment system of Russia, not the bank, but the way to restrict payments for such services. So there's a risk. And the last I wanted yesterday in Hong Kong, we discussed that topic, how much a Bitcoin costs and why. Less than 10% of the Bitcoin value is determined by demand, just to pay, and 90% today is the investment demand, to make money, to earn money. So it's not a competitor to the money, it's probably a competitor to the classic instruments of money making. And with this type of yield, we all remember the golden fish and the magic flower with petals. So selling a dream can be very favorable in Russia. If someone gives you an interest of 30, you doubt. But if they offer you 1,000, you run for it. So this is the Russian phenomena, to participate in all the pyramids you can get. You know, this is the human nature. So over 90% of the Bitcoin demand is the pyramid, actually. I shall take the liberty to go back to the drones. So if you remember, not the drones, but the flying machines. There was a competition between the different types of machines, and I believe zeppelins and planes, you know, aircraft, and we know who stayed. And probably it's going to be the same story. Probably it will boil down to some very useful tokens, or maybe digital currencies that will service specific systems. Very difficult to judge now. So we are going to stay and watch. Unfortunately, some panelists have to go. And I would like to use my privilege of a moderator and ask a question. And ask Alexei first. Among many digital currencies, there is at least one that is meant for something different. I mean, IOTA. This is a cryptocurrency, and it is declared that this cryptocurrency is meant not so much for interaction of people, but rather for interaction of the machines, M2M, machine-to-machine settlement, computer to computer. So in this future new reality where we shall have devices from the mains in the wall or driverless cars that will interact with each other and even make settlements. So let me ask you a futuristic question. What do you think about development of this M2M digital world, digital currency payments through micro robots, let's call them, in all the devices and gadgets that surround us? Thank you. So I recommend, in order to understand the future, to go and find the Sberbank commercial video where some smart robot house the master out of the house. So yes, this smart world is still murky, and we don't understand yet how the person is going to live in it. But it's obvious that that we require optimization, making it cheaper and faster, and raising efficiency of corporate processes. And we need to kind of deviate, go away from the conventional currencies. If you're a big bank with chapters across the globe, you probably don't need to use digital currencies for domestic, for internal calculations and settlement. But now the attempts are being made. If you have a treasury in one part of the world and central treasury in your headquarters, why can't you settle between them, make current settlements in this kind of digital currency, and then go to the external world with the conventional money? So I think that this situation inside the banks, inside corporation, may develop in that way. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution.
Yes, of course, you must know physics in order not to put your fingers into an electrical socket.
Well,
But a long-term view,
I can agree to many things that Alexei said. Let's imagine. But let's pretend to be futurologists. We're not talking about the present times, but imagine a big community of residents who live in some place like New York. Imagine New York in the future, and all this community would use the services of a utility company, and they need the cleaning services on the streets, procurement, and everything. In this closed system, you can, and it will be quite technological. You can use some improved blockchain to exchange, indeed, non-fiat money, but some kind of cryptocurrencies. But for that, you certainly need some exit to link to fiat money through a stock exchange, through some agency. So that's the picture that you can imagine. But the question is, shall we have propensity to develop it? What are the circumstances that will facilitate this system of interaction that's going to be transparent, clear, convenient? You see who pays, who doesn't pay. So it can be quite comfortable and connected to the smart home. So there are great opportunities, but these are kind of, science fiction opportunities. But if you sit down, you can draw a project of a community that lives on the basis of the blockchain exchange. How many years will it take? No, this is the question that does not have an answer, but the progress is ongoing. It cannot be stopped. And in a while, we shall probably have systems based on blockchains that works faster than the existing payment systems. Yes, it is feasible, and the further steps, well, we shall see what happens next. I think it is a very relevant question, very relevant product. It is necessary, it is much needed, and as a society, not a professional community, we are not ready. Let me give you an example. Remember what happened last July. Remember the story with the Facebook bots when they started inventing their own language. That's the answer to a question. Yes, we need our own payment system? So the management of Facebook just disabled them because you never know. The bots were developed to communicate with users, and suddenly they created a parallel system that no one can understand except the machines and this artificial intellect. So let me say it again. Yes, it is necessary, but not as a non-professional community, but a general community. We are not ready yet. No, we are not ready. That's true. But the technical progress cannot be stopped. So it will overflow anyway. So it's going to happen logically. So they combat the fight of centralization to decentralization. Both environments will try to demonstrate higher efficiency through technical progress. Those who centralize will use innovations, raise efficiency, information exchange, and then offer decentralized system that will probably be more efficient. This is an ongoing process, and I'm afraid we can end up in a situation from the Terminator movie. Yeah, but at least we need to remember that this challenge exists as well. So there is a principle of neutral technology that most regulators support. It means that you don't need to put all the things into one basket. There are ways to transfer information, and there are economic substances. So at least at the G20 level, this principle that in our regulation we should not give preferences to technologies, but we should regulate the economic essence, the economic structure. We need to stick to this principle, and so far there is no consensus of regulators to such an extent that we cannot even speak on the same terms. What to do with those cryptocurrencies? How are they going to develop? We are still talking as a chicken and a duck. We don't even have a common language. So I think it will evolve within the next 2 years, and there will be surprises within the next 10 years. I believe that we really need to organize practical things that are on the top of our agenda, like regulation in this area, responsibility of people who perform ICO, and things like that. So, speaking about the next step, well, it's very difficult to forecast. Let's do some practical, quick things, low-hanging fruit. Historically, it happened that in the Soviet Union and in Russia, the technical education was very good. And there was a brain drain that helped America, and there are still many people who stay or who return. And so most of the ICO project and the digital currencies, and the second in terms of capitalization is our compatriot production. $500 billion capitalization is huge monetary mass, no matter what you call it. And most of it, half of it, is in the hands of the ex-Soviet or Russian citizens. So to what extent Russia, as exporter of those brains who created this capitalization, would be willing to support or lead this technology? Because at this moment we are one of the leaders, we are among the leaders. So what next? Is Russia ready to support, to lead, and not to give way to? We have the program of digital economics and digital economy, and we place high hopes, and the president in his address spoke about it, and we have this roadmap and the program that provides passing new laws that we discussed here. So the wish to use the huge potential of the Russian brain in this digital environment where cyber scientists and math experts and programmers, we have great potential. It can make our country leapfrog in financial and other industries, including even agriculture. Digitalization can really help. There's a wish. Yes, there is intention. I guess we can read it all in the law on the federal budget. The Chinese, just the way it is. Yeah, monetary policy as well. As for the, the demand is there. Yes, the high school is still there. And I still claim that the high school is going astray from the practical area and from the side. But still, there are many talented people, talents and good education, but IP laws, but then purchasing capacity, unfortunately, is not in Russia. And comparing the quality of life, we need to work on improving it so that those people could have a desire to stay as residents in Russia, live here and work here. This is a very multifaceted, comprehensive task. Are we going to address it? This is probably the priority for the next government. And a short comment. So we keep coming back to money. And You were right in saying, in speaking about brain, technology, investment climate is all important, but the financial resources are concentrated elsewhere. So in Belarus, you can arrange an offshore company, but financial investments still will go to other locations, and Belarus may just be a transfer center. It's not going to give you an answer to your question. So the question should be answered in principle: the growth of financial markets, the growth of resources, and then just drilling down, developing the pension system and the saving system, and cutting the gray zones of the industries. There is no black and white answer to this question. Next question, please. Elena Redko from Gazprom Bank. If I use the term of Z generation, calling the digital currency a hype, that's good that we discuss it. But we see how new technologies are used in the financial institute. Last year, the Moscow Stock Exchange tested and now provides the tool as deposits to corporations through the central counter agents, and definitely it changes the banks who attract deposits, and the Sberbank and other banks consolidate and improve their market share. So my question to Sergey and Catherine: do you expect the number of banks to be reduced, or shall we see some consolidations of banks just by the fact that financial technologies threaten their business models? And how do you consider those risks in the rating agencies in their evaluations? So within the next year or two. Yes. There was a very long question. If the number of banks will go down, the answer is yes. We are now upgrading our midterm forecast. We shall definitely share our quantitative expectations of reduction of licenses in the market if we see the slowdown of this process in Russia for a number of reasons. But still, the trend is there. Yes, the number of banks will go down because of financial risks, and I think that never, just like there is no one reason, just like an aircraft does not fall because one screw or something was wrong. It's a comprehensive problem. There are several reasons. So consolidation, then situation in the market, conventional models, challenges. I shall even call this horrible word as IFRS 9, the new model of bank management. There is no data, so you can continue to no end infinitely. So definitely there is an issue, but it depends on, yes and no. It depends on the plane you consider. If it is just a quantitative plane, yes, the number of banks will be reduced. But is it a proper way to ask this question? Can we consider the whole intermediary function, or maybe share of GDP, or the growth of credit resources? So, what is the form of intermediary? So the banks in Russia dominate, but if we consider the midterm situation, even with all the difficulties we have in the insurance and pension sector, at least we cannot see the financial volumes for the economics. We had a period of turbulence, but still the trend, it's leveling off. It's going back to growth. So the growth of absolute shrinkage of financial intermediaries for the role of the industry, is not there. But coming to the micro level, certain consequences of some people, because banks close down, people find themselves on the street. There is no need to copy the functions. to duplicate their activities. So it's again a labor situation. But for the general economic situation, well, we have a consolidation fund, and it's not a question about the shape, but about the content. But the idea is the financial resource is still there, and huge number of investors still are optimistic about their deposits, because at this moment this is a primary issue. You know, considering, well, I had a couple of minutes to think about the answer. There are factors that will work for the larger or for the smaller, like outsourcing, midterm factors, marketplace development that turn the bank chains into liabilities rather than assets. But we shall not see it within the next 2 to 3 years. Within the next 2 or 3 years, we shall probably see more consolidation because compliance is very expensive. And there is a minimum vol of capital that allows you to comply, and but you need to have ROI as well. So cleansing of this banking system from the balloons, from the banks who work without any capital, so who do not properly compete with their colleagues. As for the banks in general, I believe that we kind of dilute the notion of banking or non-banking operation. The financial markets has become very convoluted and hybrid. Why we have this regulator? Because you cannot regulate one entity from 2 or 3 centers. And the services as well. There are few banks who just sell banking services only. Banks include insurance companies, broker operations, pension funds, because a person does not need pure banking services. An individual, a client, requires, well, to satisfy his needs, so he needs to invest, and then the banks, provide. And we are talking about the same thing. So probably here in midterm, we should reconsider this paradigm from the point of view of products and licenses and the differences. Because we have organizations that attract, that raise money, and here we protect the creditors, and that's pension funds and insurance organizations, and somehow we had some kind of arbitration and different regulations, and there are organizations that provide services, and that's it. It's a zoo. Historically, it so happened that we have many of them. And speaking about the outsourcing, to what extent will the regulator trust new technologies? If the regulator trusts new technologies and they prove their sustainability, so the financial organizations per se may just rid of this function and outsource those functions. And if we come to this model where the number of banks may include 2 or 3, we may have many institutions of that kind. But I agree that the financial market depends on the size of economics, and in this case, it will be the redistribution of
since
activity.
we are at the end of our time, and so I will just ask a few questions, hoping for quick and concise answers. Do you think that in Russia, so eventually crypto ruble will be issued? It's highly unlikely. If I am to give you a short answer, highly unlikely. I would say, why not? So the question, when? So not tomorrow, definitely, but sometime in future. So when we talk And I think it will happen eventually, sooner or later. And but this ruble will be tied to the fiat ruble. It will be just a different form of its operation. I adhere to the opinion that unless so the demand for cryptocurrency is related to a great extent to the lack of regulation. So a regulator cannot cannot afford to issue a crypto ruble that would allow just to go around any regulation. And that's why I don't see that there will be any demand for crypto ruble, because so the government cannot afford to have anything that cannot be regulated. And so then people can understand different things when they speak about crypto ruble, and so when because we need just to understand the terminology. So I mean the ruble that is used in blockchain, that's digital ruble. Okay, and so now we are at the end of our time. Our time is up, and I think that all the questions at the next forum, next session. So thank you for your contributions and for your wonderful interventions. Thank you very much.